Well, we have a focus this month on the shoulder, and we're going to be talking a lot about the shoulder and about the rotator cuff, particularly shoulder stability and training the rotator cuff to prevent injuries. So we brought Dr. Bones here, and I just wanted to show you the scapula. It's this guy right here. It's on your back. You can feel, if you put your hand over your shoulder, a little bone in the back. That's called the spine of the scapula. And the rotator cuff muscles all attach to the scapula, and they reach out here to the funny bone, the most comical bone in the body. So here's one muscle starts above the spine, two muscles start below the spine, and the fourth muscle starts actually on the underside and comes out here to the front. So those are the four rotator cuff muscles. I'm not going to stress you out and make you learn the names today.
We have another good video on that, though.
We do have another good video on that.
On the names.
So, but I wanted to give you an idea of where these muscles are. They're sort of draped, reaching out, and just like my hand is reaching out and creating some stability by holding onto the top of the funny bone here, the rotator cuff muscles reach out and they form a stabilizing role at the top of the shoulder. In addition to that, there's some other big muscles that reach out here and stabilize the shoulder, and we're going to talk about those. Now, you were telling me, Barb, that you have quite a few of your students who have questions about the rotator cuff too.
Yes. One of the things that I find that a lot of folks that sit at desks a lot, they have pain right here after they sit for a while, and so they're sort of like, oh, my shoulder hurts. And so teaching them to engage those big muscles that you were talking about and be able to pull back and down and then stay in the proper biomechanics, by the end of their yoga practice, their shoulders feel great. So I always say that one of the biggest things about a yoga practice is that you should feel way better at the end than you feel at the beginning.
That's true.
And so this is all about healing the shoulders and learning about the rotator cuff and how to do the proper biomechanics to strengthen it and build flexibility in it.
Cool. So in terms of creating stability in the rotator cuff, I'm just going to show people a couple simple things that they can do to start to engage the shoulder by using some of the big muscles in the shoulder. And if you take your arm here and hold it onto the side, maybe the other arm, nice. Now if you pull the elbow in, feel how that creates stability in the shoulder?
Yes.
So if I kind of tap on her back, she's engaging her lat muscles, but she's also engaging the rotator cuff muscles. Now, if she pulls back, she's really engaging the lat muscles. And so if I turn you around, if she pulls back, she's really engaging these muscles, but the rotator cuff muscles start here and they reach out here, so she's stabilizing them. If she pulls in, she's engaging here. Now, if you turn around and face the front, and then you bring your hand like this, and then pull your hand in like you're pulling towards your chest. Feel how your pec is kind of stabilized?
Yep.
Now, what you want to learn how to do is engage each of these groups of muscles. The pec, the lat, all the rotator cuff muscles, and all of the other muscles that stabilize the shoulder in here, so that when you're in these different yoga positions that we're going to get into, you can learn to use those muscles.
Exactly.
You feel better?
Yes, definitely. And now my right shoulder wants to do the same thing because my left shoulder feels better.
So instead of doing that, let's do a couple warm-up activities that you can do for the shoulder.
Perfect.
What's your favorite one?
One of my favorite shoulder warm-up exercises is just this twist, this simple
That's a good one.
twist, because as you go and look at your left hand, you're pulling down with your left lat, and you can just reach here and feel it, that you're pulling your shoulder down. And then as you spiral over to the other side, you engage your right lat, and you even engage this part of your core. So part of the training that we do, and the rotator cuff feels really secure and pulled down and anchored by this big muscle by the lat. Then as you pull forward, you feel the pec engage. So this gets the lat and the pec in alternating motions, and these cross-body movements are really good for the proprioceptive map. We found that everybody feels their shoulders are sort of woken up and they know where their shoulders are in space.
Absolutely. Everything in nature is mirrored in the human body and in life. And if you look at trees, everything's spiraling. And the more spiral movements we do, more or less the better. It's hard to go wrong with spiral movements. What's your next favorite?
My next favorite is just this motion where you get a full range of motion in the rotator cuff. So you're pulling forward and back and forward and back. And you're seeing here that the shoulder, as we saw in Dr. Bones, is a ball and socket joint. And we're making a circle. That ball is making a full circle inside that joint. And it just feels like it's lubricating it and really warming it up. And then you reverse it, slightly different, but you're pulling down with the lat and then with the pec, with the lat and the rotator cuff, and you feel all those muscles just getting nice and warmed up.
You've really gone from being a CEO to an anatomy expert.
I've had a good teacher. Lots of good teachers.
Lots of good teachers.
Yes.
So the idea is that by doing just full range of motion type of training, that stimulates the brain to create a better and better map of the movement. And as you get a real good, clear map of what's going on, it allows you to have better movement and cleaner movement and better function. Now let's take a look at a couple yoga poses.
Beautiful.
Which one do you want to do?
Well, downward dog is the one that you see in almost every class, no matter what kind of yoga class you take.
Let's see how
So
it
you wanna
looks.
See downward dog? Okay. Woof.
So Barb looks really great here in downward dog. And one thing that you can see is that her deltoid muscles are on. There's a nice long length here, and the lat muscle is on, and then all of her rotator cuff muscles are on, and they're reaching out and creating stability in her shoulder. There's a nice, gentle, long arch reaching up here to the pelvis. Basically, it looks really good. Now go ahead and come out. Now, how does it feel to be to do that pose?
Really good. My shoulders feel really balanced, and and the main thing is I didn't feel, one thing people were complaining about in downward dog is pressure on the wrist, and I didn't feel any pressure on my wrist because by having my shoulders engaged and my core, I felt the upward movement. So it's sort of like the movement comes up and then back into your heels as opposed to jamming down into the floor. That's, for me, that's one of the most profound things about getting the rotator cuff engaged and the shoulders engaged in downward dog.
So in terms of downward dog, one thing to sort of to think about is that the first thing you want to learn to do is maintain shoulder pack.
Yes.
So just like we did when you were pulling with the elbow, we have stability. So we have downward dog that looks sort of like this, but there also can be a downward dog where the arms reach up.
Up, way up, yes.
Now this is sort of another version of it. Both are good. The difference is in one, you're in shoulder pack and down. Once you start to feel really good there, then you can extend. But even when you extend,
still keep all
all
the
those
muscles
rotator
engaged.
cuff muscles are stabilizing and reaching. What are some of the other poses that you like to use for your students when you're teaching them how to engage the rotator cuff?
So one that I find is really useful is to come down onto the elbows, and there's a series of elbow poses. One of the most significant things here is you want to make sure your elbows and your wrists and your hands stay at the same distance apart, because look at, if you let your hands come in, the shoulders collapse. If you bring your hands out, the shoulders go back and down, and now the lats engage. So by just learning to imagine you have a block, or even put a block between your elbows and your hands and keep that same distance, it pulls. This is the same idea as when we were standing and Matty was pulling on my arm. So then coming up into, this is just Sphinx pose. This is a good way to practice that, and you can feel your lat. And then coming up into elbow plank, engaging the core, the shoulders feel really stable. And so this is a great way to sort of feel that shoulder stability is there and to build the strength in the shoulders. And if this is too much, a little too difficult, you can always put your knees down. Same idea, you're still getting that practice. And then come down.
Awesome.
So then eventually, of course, you can go into full plank where you're straightening your arms, and again, you're keeping that same shoulder pack. But for a lot of people, if their shoulders aren't strong or they've got some pain in their shoulders, this pose can be a little bit too much at first.
So the typical thing that I see all the time is, people who may not have a lot of experience doing a lot of yoga, and they start going to a lot of yoga classes, and then immediately they're doing sun salutations,
Yes.
Day in, day out,
Mm-hmm.
and then they start to have poor form. And so if I was to turn from the side, instead of having the shoulders down, they end up with the shoulders up like this.
Yes.
See what a biomechanically weak position that is?
Yes.
And so when you do your chaturanga, you want the shoulders to be down
Yes.
and then slightly rolled forward.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout the whole movement, you're always in sort of that same shoulder pack.
Yes.
And the hands are nice and soft. The biggest thing that I hear about is shoulder and wrist problems, because people tend to live their life up here, and they tend to live their life in tension in the wrists. And basically the funny thing is once you get your shoulder and shoulder pack stabilized and strong, and then soften the wrist, then you start to flow through these poses and they become easy.
Yeah, that reminds me, it's been so long I'd kind of forgotten about this, but I remember many, many years ago when carpal tunnel syndrome was just beginning to be talked about. That's how long ago it was. I had doctors tell me that I should have carpal tunnel surgery because I had that carpal tunnel syndrome, which is not a pleasant thing to have. But I basically healed it by just learning how to use my shoulders and do downward dog and through my yoga practice. And now I have basically no pain in my wrists. My shoulders are strong, and I could do downward dog all day long. So if you have those kinds of things, just doing some of these simple joint mobility and then also learning to engage the shoulders can actually heal the wrists. It's kind of amazing because a lot of that pain down here starts up here with the nerve compression.
Okay, folks, there you have it. So stay tuned and we'll keep you updated with further developments.